Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 880A, and today's date is January 29th, 2016, and the title of the episode is The U.S. Economy is Propped Up by Obamacare Spending, which is Completely Unsustainable. Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we see that the economies in every single country, they're starting to crack and fall apart at this point. Yes, today, it's Friday. We got this great happy ending with the market going almost to 400 points. But when we look at what's really going on and the way people feel about the economy, everyone is not saying, oh my God, the market's going up. I feel better. It's at all-time highs. Yeah, it dropped a little bit, but now it's going back up. They're looking at business. They're looking at trying to get a job. They're looking at how much money is coming in. Do they feel secure about what's going on? And out in Canada, we see small business owners. They are feeling the pain of the economy because optimism dropped to the lowest level since March of 2009. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business created a report and it said business barometer in Canada has a scale between 0 and 100. A level above 50 indicates the owners of these businesses expect businesses to get stronger, the economy to do well, and they expect this over the next 12 months. But when they took this barometer and they measured it among the small business owners, the number was not anywhere near where they thought it was going to be. In January, the barometer dropped to 54.3. This is the third monthly decline in a row. It is approaching the point where people are saying maybe this economy is not growing, because anywhere from 65 to 70 shows the economy is growing. We're below that at this time in Canada. So small business owners right now realize that this economy, it's not growing and we're in trouble. And we are in trouble. Even Macy's here in the United States is saying, okay, they are not expecting a major change in sales in this year, January 2016, or moving forward in 2016. And they're looking possibly to close more stores. What does this tell you? It tells you that this illusionary economy is declining and it's accelerating. Actually, the GDP numbers came out for the fourth quarter, and this is coming from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. And the U.S. is not in recovery. The growth rate was 0.69%. The annualized rate of economic growth was the lowest since the first quarter of 2015, when it grew around 0.64%. And of course, they blamed it on the weather back then. This time, however, what are they going to blame it on? Because the weather really wasn't that bad during the fourth quarter. So they say, oh, it's too warm, it's too cold, it's too snowy, it's too sunny. Basically, forget about the weather. It's the economy. It's the people. If the people don't have jobs, they're not going to go out and spend. If people have part-time jobs, they're nervous, they're afraid. They don't have extra funds. That's the problem. So what allowed the economy to reach even 0.69% in GDP? Because really, it is really around negative number. It's a negative number. And when you look, we see it's Obamacare once again. Now, this country is basically living off Obamacare spending. Now, when I say living off, I don't mean we're all living off of it. The economy is chugging along on the people spending their money on healthcare in the service industry. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. The second highest to this spending category is recreational goods and vehicles. So because of Obamacare, because of the penalties, because of the premiums continually rising, this is what's pushing the economy and keeping it propped up. Now, is this real? No. They included this in the GDP numbers because they needed a way to prop it up. Again, it's completely manipulated. That's it. Because when people at this point see the premiums continually going up and up and up and up, more people are going to drop out. They won't be able to handle it. Especially if you have a part-time job. It's impossible. Now, manufacturing here in the United States is continually declining. The Baltic Dry Index right now has fallen again by 8 points. It's down to 317. I mean, it's absolutely awful. And what does this mean? It means that there's no demand. There's no demand here in the U.S., throughout Europe, and the manufacturers and the raw material just aren't needed. The Bank of Japan came out, and they are pushing negative interest rates. Why? Because it's time to take from the people. It's time to prop up the economy because it is failing. And of course, today we saw the market skyrocket because who doesn't love a negative interest rate coming in? So we have Europe, Bank of Japan in negative territory. United States raised the interest rates because everything implodes and ends up at the source. And the source of this entire economic collapse is the United States. All the other countries feel it first, and then it comes inward. We saw this back in 1929. Where all throughout Europe, everything was falling apart. It's falling apart now. And this is telling us that we are one step closer to a full collapse of the central bank regime. Because they're doing whatever they can to keep this together. I mean, who has ever heard of negative interest rates? Because if they raised interest rates, guess what? The whole thing falls apart right now. And this is why Europe, Japan cannot do this. Because their economies are a lot worse than the United States right now. Because the United States has the ability to create this money. The United States has the ability to export its inflation. The United States has the ability to manipulate everything. While other countries struggle to do this because countries within the Eurozone, they have to beg for money. They have to beg for this. And they have to implement austerity. And it shows up all throughout the country, showing that people are out of work. Businesses are closing down. Here in the United States, continually creating money, continually giving food stamp cards, continually helping people. You don't see the lines. You don't see the bread lines. You don't see people suffering. You don't see any of this because it's all hidden today. But eventually, it cannot be sustained. It's completely impossible. And the central bankers know this right now. They know they can't keep this up. Saudi Arabia right now basically is hemorrhaging about $19.4 billion in reserves. And this was during December. And basically, their entire thing shrank, their reserve shrank to $608 billion. Now, of course, most likely there was a drawdown in U.S. Treasuries. But again, this is kept a secret, so we don't really know what they have. But again, as we move forward here, this economy that we've been tracking, that we've been reporting on, is accelerating right now. Every day it gets worse and worse, not better and better. Every day the central bankers need to come out with a new trick, a new way of manipulating the system to keep the system alive. How much longer can they continually do this? And I know a lot of you know what I mean. I've gone through this many, many times, and I'm still going through it. And people who live on a budget, I have a family, I have children, and as things get harder and harder, you cut things out. You try to make things work for you. Other people who have credit cards basically continually put their expenses on credit cards, and they clear one credit card, and they get another credit card which pays off the first one. Then once that one fills up, they get another credit card, and this continually goes on until, guess what? The credit runs out. No one will give you the next card. Or you have so much debt, you cannot pay it anymore. You cannot make those credit card interest payments because your income isn't going up. It's staying exactly where it is. Actually, in the case of the United States, they've done whatever they possibly can to get the income, the revenue coming into the government as high as they possibly can. This is what FATCA was all about. This is what about the Obama tax was all about. This is what the carbon tax is going to be about. And as more and more people lose their jobs, and they're going from high-paying jobs to low-paying jobs, guess what? The revenue drops, and it's getting harder and harder. This is why a lot of these governments have to bring the interest rates down, 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 because they can't pay for the debt. It's impossible. And just looking at your own household, you can see how eventually it does come to an end and you declare bankruptcy. It happens with corporations. It happens all the time. And it will happen here in the United States. It's a fact. People can pretend that it's not going to happen. People can say, oh, this is just ridiculous. They can just continually create money. It's not a big deal. But you have to look at it from other countries. When the central bank here in the United States loses credibility and the countries don't want to do business and they say, you know what, maybe it is better doing business in our own currency. Maybe it's better that we're not with this system anymore, which a lot of countries are doing. We see the BRICS. We see China making bilateral trade deals all over the world, setting up clearinghouses for the yuan renminbi, doing business bypassing the dollar. When all of these countries, or the majority of them, decide, okay, enough's enough, this is when it's going to be a problem for the United States. We're already seeing it in the Middle East. We're seeing more and more countries where they're kicking out their puppet governments. They're taking back their countries and saying, you know what, maybe we don't need to sell the oil using the dollar. We're seeing it in Libya. We're seeing it in Yemen. We're seeing it in Iraq. We're seeing it in every single location. And once they decide that they don't want to sell their oil using the dollar, we have a problem. Iran, for instance, they're making deals all over the place selling their oil. Eventually, they're not going to sell it using the dollar. They're going to be using their own currency, the yuan, the ruble, gold, whatever they can use, and they don't need to use the dollar. There's no reason to. And when this happens, guess what? The dollars come back to the United States. And this is where we have the problem, because it devalues the dollar. We see inflation. And this is the direction we are headed. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.